dry method of cooking. What does that mean? So a dry method of cooking is when you use hot air to cook the food. There's no moisture involved, no water, no oil, nothing like that. You're not submerging anything into anything. So roasting goes straight into the oven and the magic happens there. So the temperature of the oven depends on how much browning of your food you want. It does not mean the higher the temperature of the oven, the faster your food's going to cook. No. Really comes down to if you have a higher temperature, the outside of the food is going to cook first before the inside of the food has a chance to catch up. What does that do? It means that the outside layer of your food is going to get more caramelization, more texture, and that's where you really get that crunchiness that will also seal in the moisture and the juices of your food. So roasting is usually used for vegetables and large proteins. So think pot roasts, whole chickens, whole turkeys, those kind of items that take a very long time to cook. So the key thing with these types of foods is that they're actually going to release a lot of moisture, a lot of water, a lot of oil, stuff that's not going to evaporate into the air. So what happens is that the heat of the oven's going to cook and push the heat from obviously the top side on both sides, but also the cool thing is that it's actually going to cook from the underneath as well by pushing the hot air through. There's a couple of different ways to go about this. When you're roasting like a whole chicken or a whole turkey, those larger protein items, you never want the food to sit directly on the pan. So what you're going to want to do is take a pan, line it with foil, and then you're going to want to do one of two things. Either you have a rack at home that's going to sit right on top. So what that's going to do is allow all the juices from the proteins to drip down onto the sheets down below. And that's actually something that you would be able to use for your gravies and your sauces afterwards. If you don't have a rack, another good option is to use mirepoix. You want a rough chop of onions, celery, and carrots. And so what that is going to do is actually all these vegetables are going to cook along with the protein itself. Kind of want to mix it in there. And so what I have here is a nice solid base that is actually just as high as the roasting rack that we had. But what that's going to do is actually the vegetables will cook with the protein as the juices drip down, off the chicken, turkey, whatever it is that you're roasting, and it's going to mix in with these vegetables and give them a lot of flavor. And actually these roasted veggies is what you can use for your sauces afterwards, so for your gravies and things, and pan juices as we call them. Or another thing that you can do is you can actually use both of these methods and still have the vegetables here on the bottom, but put the roasting rack right on top. And what that will do is the juices will still drip down, get it right into the vegetables, but afterwards it will be just easier to pick up the roast, let it rest all the way at the end while you still try to figure out what's going on with your veggies. The important thing to note is carryover cooking. Carryover cooking, I would have to say, is one of the main things that we forget when we're cooking at home. So what is it? So when you take your meat out of the oven, it will still continue cooking for another 10 to 15 minutes. And this I'm talking about like doing large roasts. So 10 to 15 minutes, it still continues cooking. All that heat that's on the outside of the food will still continue radiating inwards. This is actually the top reason why your meats come out dry, is that you cooked it to the right internal temperature, you cooked it to the right amount of doneness that you wanted, but since it's still going to continue cooking for a little bit, it goes over what you want it to be. So my recommendation is that take it out maybe 5 to 7 degrees before it hits that proper internal temperature, or 5-7 minutes before the desired doneness that you want it to be. And while it's resting for those 10-15 minutes, it will help redistribute the juices and help the meat come to the right doneness. And one more thing to note is making sure that when you're roasting is to have items that are uniform in shape and size. Otherwise, if you have a chicken that's got or a leg sticking out or a wing sticking out, or your vegetables aren't cut the same way, or your roasts aren't tied down to make sure that they're a uniform log, what's going to happen is that things are going to cook at different times. So if you have a thicker part or a skinnier part, one's going to be raw when the other one's going to be already done. So we want to make sure everything is cooking evenly at the same time. Hopefully I cleared some things up about roasting and didn't make things too complicated. If you have any more questions, please leave them down below. But otherwise, these are the basics of roasting.